let's move into the mock draft. And guess what? Da, 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 da. You're on the clock, right? It's Tennessee Titans at the 101. This is a consensus mock draft, so we're going to work together here to fill this thing out. So my proposal here for you is that we should probably go ahead and take. I mean, you guys are so good, with Derrick Henry. I think that like Nate Knoll out of Mizzou is probably a really good pick here. Uh,
Oh.
what say you? What do you think?
I think it's Cam Ward. I think all indications feel like Cam Ward is going to be the pick here at number one. It took a while for them to get here, because it was like, okay, well, what are you going to do? Or would you trade down? Would you select Abdul Carter or something like that? I think it took for them going to the combine, having that pro day, having those visits to really kind of solidify them. And then you get this latest note about them canceling the with Shadur. And I think that just basically put the nail in the coffin that going to be the guy.
Yeah.
And
They've seen
I was, and I mean, I've really kind of bought into just kind of like what the one good comp I heard from him about him is Jordan Love. Going back, circling all the way back to that. Green Bay fans will love that. But there's some Jordan Love type qualities where this guy is super confident in his arm and his playmaking ability. Sometimes that confidence can get him into trouble a little bit. The mechanics do need a little bit of work. But I think you're really excited because every year, Matt, just by looking at what he's done, I think in high school or something like that, he was in like a wing T offense. So it's like, well, who runs a wing T anymore in the modern
right.
day? But I mean, he has improved steadily each and every year where he's been at, whether it was at Incarnate Word, whether it was a couple years at Washington State, and then Miami, he led them to this high flying offense, and this guy looked better, each and every game. And are there a couple bonehead mistakes? Yeah, but I mean, you take a look at some of the top quarterbacks in the league, like a Mahomes, like a Jalen, and I'm not saying he's going to be this, but you take a look at them, but they take a lot of risk,
Mm-hmm.
but with their throws, and
Used to.
they yeah, and he's got a lot of torque, and he's got the ability to. So I think this is going to be the pick for the Titans, and taking Cam Ward, unless somebody just says like, we're straight, 4 first-round picks, and we're going to trade up and like, yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's going to be
No,
Cam Ward.
if there was gonna be a trade, it would have happened already. I'm with you though, 100%. I think this is Cam Ward. I think that at this point, I don't think there's any way around it. I think if they were so enamored with Travis Hunter, they would have been the team to sign Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson or Joe Flacco or anybody, but they haven't done any of those kinds of moves. So totally, I'm with you. Cam Ward off the board to your Tennessee Titans, Ryan. Ryan, how many times since we've met had the Tennessee Titans drafted their quarterback of the future? I feel like this has to be like number three. I mean, they had a long time with Tannehill there. But obviously we had Mayo Man, and we had Mariota, and we had now Cam Ward. I think so. I think in our friendship, you've drafted three franchise quarterbacks.
Oh wait, when was Mariota though? When was Mariota? Was that 2014?
Oh, that was 2016. So it would have been just
Wait,
before we
no.
met. I think you're right. I think Mariota was just before we met.
So it's only been one, and the one has been,
Uh,
I don't even know what to describe the Mayo Man here, but
he is the Mayo Man, and Mayo sucks.
oh
Are
boy.
you a
But
Mayo guy, Ryan? You like Mayo?
I don't like condiments in general. So,
Really?
no, no.
So I am largely with you on that. Actually, I can't stand mustard. I don't like most salad dressing. I like honey mustard though. But I do love buffalo sauce and barbecue sauce. Those are like really the two.
Okay.
You know who else loves some barbecue sauce, Ryan? The team who's the same color as barbecue sauce. It's the Cleveland Browns. This is why I get to do a little bit of hosting for this one, Ryan. So Cleveland Browns picking second overall. It feels like almost every year they're picking up here very highly because every year they freaking suck. They have, as you mentioned, they have signed the likes of Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. I can't believe that signing Joe Flacco brought Twitter to where it did yesterday of just ruling out QB at 2 like it did. I love Joe, but he's 40. And I guess I'm with everyone in that regard, though. Like, yeah, sign Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. I think Pickett also being there matters here. I guess that rules him out of quarterback. The question, Brian, then becomes: do they go with the unicorn or do they go with the pass rusher and try to pair a real scary strength here with Myles Garrett, who just got extended? Or do they go Travis Hunter and have some fun?
Man, one that's been that's come up in my mind is as far as like stacking the picks, like first and second round. I would say before the Flacco signing, I think you could argue like, okay, what should the Browns do? Should they take Shadur and take the edge rusher, whatever player later on, or do they go and take Carter or Hunter and then go take your quarterback later? And I think the latter option would be the better move, even though the quarterback draft is not great in this draft. But I think that's kind of where they're at now. I think it's squarely at taking a blue chip prospect here and then finding your quarterback later. And I mean, that could be trading back up into the first round. Um, Tell you what, it's tempting to put Abdul Carter with Myles Garrett. It
Isn't
is.
that tempting? I agree. It is. It is because that's a scary pairing right there. Like, and you think about, we have seen this in the past work for some teams where you don't have much on defense, but you have a pass rush. We've seen that really work. And that pairing is tantalizing. So is the guy who's a unicorn, though. I'd
Mm-hmm.
probably lean ever so slightly Travis Hunter, I think, but I am perfectly happy if you want to go Carter.
I think in recent mocks I've gone with Hunter, and I think a lot has been because there's some recent momentum that's been reported that
Yeah.
it feels like Cleveland is trending towards Travis Hunter. And I mean, we just talked about kind of like what he would be in earlier, and I think it makes all the sense in the world to go and take Travis Hunter here at number 2. So we are going to do that here,
Yep.
and he is
Let's
going to
take
be
Travis
a
Hunter.
Cleveland Brown.
I tell you what, I was thinking about Travis Hunter this week at the airport, and I was thinking about like the versatile players we've seen in the past, and because we always haven't had a two-way versatile players like this, but we have had some players that coaches get and they just don't know what to do with. And one of the players that came to mind for me was a Browns draft pick, Jabril Peppers. He was this guy
Ooh,
who
yeah,
the coaches just did not know what to do. My hope for Hunter is because it's two opposite sides of the ball, they know what to do with him as a receiver. They know what to do with him as a corner, and these are two non-conflicting things. Because then I was thinking about like Kyle Pitts. I think it's kind of another example of this, where it's like, okay, he's a tight end, but we can flip him out. We can do all these things, and they just don't really know what to do with him. He hasn't, hit the ceiling, right? Um, who was the other one? Isaiah Simmons was the third player. I thought those three
yeah,
as these guys who coaches just never figured out how to use these pieces. They're really fun and they're just so good that in college they can dominate. But then you get to the NFL where everyone is so good and they can't. And so you need the coaches to use them strategically and haven't been able to do it. My hope for Hunter is the fact that you're not deciding between two positions on the same side of the ball. That it's like you can treat him as two separate players as opposed to one player you're using twice. That's my
yeah.
hope.
Yeah, and
You
I also think he's not the biggest guy in the world, but I think the difference with the college and the pro game, you don't have as many snaps in the pro game as the college game. Now the pro game is a lot faster,
Yep.
but there's a lot more timeouts. And so I think even though the game is faster in the NFL, a lot more physical in the NFL, he wouldn't be playing an absurd amount of snaps like he is in college, where he's
Yeah.
playing like over 110 snaps.
Yeah.
So I think that's something else to kind of take a look at too.
And like I said, I really think if I was the coach, and one thing this thing is interesting, Stefanski is the coach of the Browns. And an offensive and this is actually one thing that's gonna be really interesting with where he lands. I think if he goes to Cleveland, if he goes to New York, he's a wide receiver first. If he goes to New England and it's a defensive minded coach with Vrabel, I think maybe he's a bit of a corner first, right? I think whoever that head coach is going to have a lot of influence on why did we draft this player? What are you to our roster? And what do, quite frankly, what do I, as head coach, want to do with you? I think there's going to be a lot of that. So I think if it's either the Browns or Giants with Dable and Stefanski, I'll be very happy as a dynasty player. Let's go over to those Giants here. Picking number 3, Brian Dable. Man, oh boy, Brian. What's tricky here? The dude, I feel like Dable was given a lot of green light last season to bench Daniel Jones, to even bench Drew Lock, lose games, pick high, and go get your quarterback, right? But then I'm sitting here going, man, I think then they started scouting these quarterbacks and said there ain't one to get.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and sign Jameis and Russ, I guess, and we'll Pittsburgh Steeler this sucker. So, and the thing is, like, their offensive line isn't actually that terrible. Andrew Thomas is an excellent left tackle, so I think that kind of rules out that possibility. They've got Brian Burns as pass rusher, but I guess Abdul Carter is just too good to move on from here, right?
I think so. And listen, you also got to take into account like Burns or Thibodeau, they'll miss a game here or two, and so you can just like put Abdul Carter in. But I think it's also just tempting, just like on third down, you see, and
Yeah,
you got this NASCAR package of Thibodeau, Burns, Carter, and Dexter Lawrence,
yeah,
and you can just do all these different crazy types of things, twists, stunts, all this type of stuff. You can do all that with those guys. Incredibly enticing there for this New York Giants defense, which, I mean, I don't think Burns or Thibodeau should prevent you from drafting a guy like Abdul. I don't think it should. So I think if you are in agreement there, I think Abdul Carter is the pick.
yep. And one thing I agree with you too there a lot is edge rushers. You could just use more. That is a position where you can just have more and more guys. I tell you what, Ryan, I think we often point and laugh at those teams who move up one spot in a trade. I actually think a Giants Browns swap makes a lot of sense for both sides, right? I think the Giants could really use Travis Hunter as both a receiver and a corner. I think the Browns would be really happy having Abdul Carter to pair up with Miles Garrett. I think that that's maybe a spot to see the old Mitch Trubisky trade happen, and it actually makes sense. But this is a mock draft where we will not be doing trades because that's how that's the little bit of power that I hold in this organization. All right, number 4, the New England Patriots. Last year drafted Drake May highly in the first round. I loved what I've seen. He could really use some O line. He could really use some wide receivers. There's not a wide receiver to go get here though, Ryan. Defense also needs a lot of work. They spent a lot of money though this offseason on some guys.
Yeah.
What direction do you see this going for the New England Patriots?
I think if the board falls this way, I think it makes it easier for you to take the tackle here. Because then you're not considering, okay, do we take a need over best player available? I think with that not being the case here, you're like, okay, we know what our needs are. We know we need a tackle desperately on the left side for our quarterback. I think you also take. I've seen Jalen Walker being brought up here recently with the Patriots. Adding to that defense a little bit. But is he? What is he? What does Vrabel see him as? Is he an off-ball linebacker, stack linebacker? Is he edge? What is he? I think it's tackle here for me, but it depends on who. Because Will Campbell, it's like how long are his arms, and you got the combine saying one thing and the LSU pro day saying another, and now we're debating, who's the liar here, where we're talking about arm length. And so we have that. Then you got Armand Membu from Mizzou, somebody that Rebecca is very familiar with, seeing Mizzou play last year. Cool. But there's been some talk about, he can maybe make the left tackle. We saw that try to happen last year with J.C. Latham, but now he's back on the right side. And Membu is one of the younger players in this draft. He's like 21. It depends on what the Patriots want to do at tackle. Would you want to get after the guy at left tackle with the arm length questions, but has proven production in the SEC level, or do you want to get the guy who also has proven production at the SEC level, but is a right tackle, but you would be moving to left tackle in this case?
I am trying to remember who is on the New England Patriots offensive line right now.
I'm trying to think because they signed Morgan Moses to be their right
Oh,
tackle.
so that'd be your right tackle spot there. Who the heck is their left tackle? Of course, the unofficial are just not loading right now. It
Well,
is okay. Verderian Lowe, according to ESPN. I do not know who that is. So Ryan, I'm with you here. Left tackle is probably going to be the move. I was actually going to bring up the idea of going with the defensive tackle here, Mason Graham, but I think you're right.
ooh,
Well, I was just thinking about Vrabel and how he would probably want to do things. I think as long as you stick in the trenches, you're probably about right there. I think Will Campbell is who I've seen go ahead most of the time. So I would lean that direction.
I think it's who yeah, I think that's who I would go with too. It's just like Membu could be a great left tackle, but you just don't know, and you got a premium pick here at number 4.
Yeah.
Just go and take the guy that you can just plug in and play at left tackle that can play that position. So I mean, but I could see the Mason Graham pick. I could see that. I could see I could see Jalen Walker go here too. But listen, that need at tackle.
Can I
That's
bring up
this. The
can I
Yeah,
bring up a crazy idea?
yeah. Let's go for
Ashton Genty
it. uh,
at
I don't
four
know.
overall. Like Drake May needs okay. I'm not advocating for this necessarily, but here would be the case if I was. Drake May needs help. There's not a wide receiver to take here. So if you take a wide receiver, you're majorly reaching for it, right? As a coach, Mike Vrabel's best success came with Derrick Henry. And look, there are not two more opposite players than Ashton Genty and Derrick Henry. The
Yeah,
only thing those two guys have in common is they're both really good, but they do them in polar opposite ways.
yeah,
And quite frankly, Ramondre Stevenson is just the guy, right? Um, that would be my 3 point case as to why they should go Ashton Genty at 4 overall. But I'm not fully advocating for that. I agree with you, Will Campbell. Let's go ahead and lock that in.
yeah. I mean, the left tackle is the second most important position on the offense, maybe on the whole team in general. So I mean, I think you need to
Gotta
go
figure
with
that out.
you
You,
the tackle.
you can't get Drake.
Jacksonville.
Yeah, so Jacksonville. I would say this is also definitely Mason Graham. I feel like is who I've seen almost everywhere for this one. I do think they could get a little spicy and go with like one of the weapons, like Tyler Warren, Ted McMillan. I think they could get a little spicy and do something like that if they want, because they could really use that. They traded away Christian Kirk. They sent out Evan Ingram. Like they need some weapons here. But I think it's Mason Graham. I think they go that route. They've got a couple young offensive tackles, so I don't think Membo makes sense either. So yeah, Mason Graham.
I'll also throw in Jalen Walker here.
Okay,
Give them
sure.
another Walker from Georgia. I mean, you do have Josh Hines Allen, and you do have Trevor, but he can go inside at times. Their pass rush wasn't the best last year, so maybe you can add Walker in there to give him some boost. But I think Mason Graham. I think he's a safe pick. I mean, just watching him play at Michigan, um, I'll tell you what, both him and Kenneth Grant, these Michigan defensive tackles are good, man. They're really good, and he was a guy that just even as a sophomore was just blowing offensive linemen off the ball and just beating them to the punch, whether it's in the run game, in the pass game. So I think if you're Jacksonville, you just plug them right in the middle. And also, James Gladstone, just coming from the Rams last year, the new GM, he saw them take a guy in Braden Fisk who made a very much an impact in year one. And I feel like that could be who Mason Graham is, uh, just like body size wise and like what he's able to bring. So I think you watch what Fisk did. I think for Gladstone, you're like, let's bring that over to Jacksonville. We got Walker, we got Hines Allen. Let's add to our interior, and I'm going to be with you. I'm going to go with the Mason Graham. I think this is like you. It's one I've seen most,
Yeah.
and I feel like that. I think that's. I feel like it's not a lock, but I feel like I would lock that in like 95%. That it will happen if he's there.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that one's pretty quite solid. So that brings us then over to number 6 overall. And this is a team that's interesting to me with the Las Vegas Raiders. And part of what makes them interesting is I feel like name a position on a football field. Unless you said the words tight end, they kind of need it. And so they can kind of go anywhere they want to here. They did just trade for and sign Geno Smith to an extension. So maybe that rules out quarterback, but quite frankly, a quick spot track search. And I don't think this is a contract that like necessitates not taking a quarterback. They can get out of this sucker pretty easily after 2025. So they could still go that route if they would like. But I could see this one going really any direction they would like to. I could see this being my Ashton Genty spot. I could see this being a Membo. I can, not Tyler Warren, but Ted McMillan. Like you said, Jalen Walker pairing him up with Max Crosby. Pretty much everywhere. Even Shador Sanders, I think, is in play here.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about because Shadur has some relationship with Brady, so I think that's something you got to take into consideration too because you got that relationship there with Brady, who is looking at the Raiders and like a one of the I forget what his role is, like part time owner or something like
I think he's a
that, but
minority, yeah,
uh,
minority owner.
yeah. So he is the one I've seen here a lot. I'll tell you why I think it's very tough to see Shadur go here. Listen, Pete Carroll. I mean, you guys might see him at WrestleMania. Who knows? You might run to him. You might give him. You might talk about this and say, "Hey, we went here with number 6."
You know what?
Um,
If in all seriousness, if I see Pete Carroll, I'm gonna tell him I agree with throwing the ball at the Super Bowl and not running it. I am like the biggest defender of that play call. It is such a results oriented just landscape out there that people have crapped on him for 10 years. I defended that play call. I still defend that play call. Um, so that in all seriousness, if I see him walking down the street chomping on some bubble gum, I'm gonna go, Pete, I got you. I get it. I would have had Russ throw the ball too.
yeah.
Then I would
But
bring up number 6 overall pick. And Ryan, this is then what I would say.
yeah, I think. Listen, Pete's not getting any older, or getting any younger rather. He is getting older.
You're
He
probably
is getting.
right. He's
You know,
not getting older. He still looks like he did when he came into back in the league in 2012.
yeah. But I listen. I think with the way this team is constructed right now, the wide receivers is not one that pops off the board here. I think for number 6. I mean, unless you want to go Tet here, you
I can see
go
that.
Will Johnson, maybe. I, I think Pete is going to want to, and you can tell him this too when you see him in here
Yeah,
soon.
I'll let
I
him know.
think I think he wants to have a physical, offense, and you got Bowers there, who's a physical tight end, and you and going to add to this running game. But here's another question. We talk about with the Browns, and the stacking of picks here. If you're the Raiders, do you take the running back here, or do you wait, knowing that it's a deep class, and taking one in the second? Getting maybe one of those Ohio State guys who Chip Kelly, your new offensive coordinator, who he knows. You know, I think that's a very valid question to bring up here.
Real quick, the one thing I'm looking up. Okay, he's 6'2". That okay, Will Johnson. I just looked up 6'2", 194. That fits the mold of a Pete Carroll corner. He likes his corners to be very lanky, very long. He wants that height with his corners. Sherman's obviously the big example, but Brandon Browner, Trey Flowers, right? He's really liked those corners that have length to them. So I'm a little bit sold just on that one fact alone on Will Johnson. I still lean Ted McMillan personally for the Raiders, but if you want to go Will Johnson, I can hop on board.
mm, I'm still thinking about Janie. I,
Okay, yeah,
I'm
because
think.
look, we also know Pete loves his running game. I'm with you. I think they can play the board a little bit and take one in round two. Judkins feels like a Pete Carroll guy, right? I think he could look at Judkins and see Marshawn Lynch. Um, but I can get behind that too. That's one thing though, man. Genty, he's not very big, and
No,
that's
he's
where I
not.
think both Carroll and Vrabel might shy away a bit.
But I think Raiders they got a good offensive line up front, a solid offensive line at the very least, where they can they can establish a physical run game there, um, and establish a physical offense. And like you said, Pete likes his running back, so
I
I,
just think
I'm
bigger than that
I'm
though.
leaning towards Janie. I'm leaning towards Janie.
I I
Do you want to
really
go Will Johnson?
I want to go Will Johnson. I really just think Genty's too small for
Okay,
people. Because also, okay, so Marshawn is the obvious one, right? Ken Walker, definitely not a small guy by any means. Zach Charbonnet, big back. I'm trying to remember who it was that he drafted in the first round who was a total bust.
Rashad
Uh,
Penny.
Rashad Penny. Um, I'm trying to remember what his sizing was. I think he was more of a smaller back, and it didn't work. You know. So if you're Pete, I think we go Will Johnson here.
Okay, Will Johnson is, and they do need help at corner. They do need help.
Yes.
Yes, and you got all those quarterbacks in that division that you're going against. All those play callers. You need help.
And he fits that physical prototype that we have seen with Pete Carroll corners for 15 years.
I I will say Johnson. It feels like there's a little bit of a slide with him. He hasn't really done any the testing. He was banged up for a little bit of last year, but I mean the profile is what you want out of a corner. I mean I think back to Michigan and Ohio State back in 2023. Hey, he's made some big plays against Marvin Harrison Jr. He went up against him and he did not shy away and he held his own. So I mean, listen, you go against one of the wide receiver prospects that we've had in recent memory, and you do well. I think that's of note. So Will Johnson there at number 6. Matt, we got the Jets at 7.
Jets, 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 Jets. Ryan, my first proposal here is going to be Armand Membu here. The Jets' offensive line is so bad that Aaron Rodgers refuses to retire because of how bad it was. Um, it needs some help here. Um, that's my. I know there's the Genty rumors and like trading Brees Hall. I think that's a net zero proposal to
hmm.
me. I think Tyler Warren is mildly interesting as an idea here. I think people a lot of times have kind of been like, oh, thinking, Jets tight end's been a big old nothing burger since like what, gosh, Justin Keller, I guess. Um, I think with Justin Fields at quarterback, though, you got to get him some O line help because he's literally never had it before. It'd be a new
Yeah,
experience.
and I think it also makes a lot of sense because it feels like with Aaron Glenn, it's going as a defensive guy, you're going to run the ball more with those guys, and you need the offensive line help. But guess what? Armand Membu is one of the better run blockers in this draft, and he's a plug and play right tackle. So you got Fashanu on your left side,
Yep.
just plug and play Membu on your right side. But I will say, I did see something about Tyler Warren and see like they're doing some really extensive research on Tyler Warren. I think it's probably because they hate they missed out on Brock last year,
Sure.
but I like Membu here pick.
Real quick, their new offensive coordinator came over from the Lions. Okay, that's interesting. Because I think we're gonna see, and we're seeing it right now in real time with both this, the passing coordinator from the Lions, now the Jets, Aaron Glenn with the Jets, Ben Johnson the Bears. We're seeing kind of like how we saw a lot of Rams and Shanahan influence, McVay influence across the league. I think we're gonna start to see more of that come from the Lions too. And I think the
Hmm.
Lions, at their core base structure, it's all about the offensive line. The weapons are super flashy and great, but their offensive line is solid as a rock, and they have a quarterback who just makes the right decision. And I think we're going to see a lot of that in these two teams with the Bears and the Jets. So I don't know if they just don't have the quarterback to make those decisions, but yeah, I totally think offensive lines. Let's lock in Membu here, and that will take us then to the Carolina Panthers, picking eighth overall. I think you can make a case they need a quarterback a little bit. I'm kidding. Bryce Young played really good at the back half of last year.
He
Um,
did.
they could probably use a few different things to help him out. Is this a Ted McMillan, a Tyler Warren? Jalen Walker, I think, is definitely in play here on the defensive side because they lost Brian Burns last year. That defense is pretty pathetic. I think, this could be. I think those are probably my candidates here, Ryan. Is Warren, McMillan, and Walker.
I'd probably lean towards Walker. I
Okay.
think I'd probably lean towards Walker because I think like they need some juice on the edge. They signed a couple defensive tackles in free agency. They almost got Milton Williams, and then he's like, okay, well I got a better deal in New England, so I'm going to Foxborough. So I think listen, this defense needs some help everywhere. They could use a corner here. If Will Johnson was still available, I think that would be that'd be up for them as well. I think Jalen Walker's who my preference is, but again, this guy is as far as like his size, he's like 6'1", he's 245 or something like that. It wasn't really. It feels like it could be in that Micah Parsons type of thing where I think like you see these off-ball linebackers transition over to edges, and you're like, can they make this transition? I think that's the thing with Jalen Walker here. This guy is explosive and he does pack a punch, but I think that's something you got to consider. Now, even if he's a linebacker here, and off-ball linebackers here in the top 10 aren't great, but you could use some help on defense wherever you can get it in your front seven.
My case for Tet here is it's twofold. Number one, I think the goal of the Carolina Panthers this year is not to win football games. It is to make a decision on Bryce Young. And bringing in Ted McMillan would help you out with doing that. I think my second reason for Ted McMillan is he is a better version of Xavier Legette that they drafted a year ago. I think, stylistically, they're kind of similar, big body guys. And then third of all, I mentioned a lot of Pete Carroll, kind of the prototypes that you see with these coaches liking. Dave Canales obviously loved having Mike Evans and he loved having DK Metcalf. I don't know if Tet is those guys, but he is the
Yeah,
closest shot you can take to those guys. And so I could see him really wanting to get that in there for his quarterback.
yeah, that's a great case, because he's worked with those bigger bodied wide receivers, but it's just like, is he going to be a Mike Evans? Is he going to be that type of receiver that's just uber reliable and gets you 1,000 yard seasons every year that he's in the league. Which
Right.
still like I can't believe that's still and he's done that, but I think that that's a good point. That could be where Canales, that could be where his head is at. I mean, listen, Carolina, they got tons of needs. They got tons of needs. I don't think you can go wrong. I think you just need to add some young talent. I mean, you didn't have you didn't have your first round pick last year, so I think you got to do something good here to add to your. And listen, wide receiver, edge here, those are premium positions,
Yeah.
so you need to boost one of them.
I'll let you make the final call. Did I sell you enough on Ted McMillan for that spot? Or do you want to stick with
Uh,
Walker?
that was a good case for McMillan. I think I am going to go Walker.
Okay.
But you did make a really good case for Ted.
Okay.
I almost was like I almost pulled the trigger there.
When it happens, you just remember this.
All right, we're sticking in the NFC South. We're going down to the Big Easy. We're going to New Orleans. Uh,
This team
Matt,
is so gross. This team is
this team,
disgusting.
I don't know. Honestly, I just don't have a clue of what to do about this team. Now, Shadur is still on, but is he a Kellen Moore type of quarterback with what we've seen work with in recent years? With Dak, with Herbert. I don't know. And so it's like, well, and I also just saw something where Derek Carr, like, there's a potential shoulder injury where it's like he could be out, for a lot of next season. But I take a look at the Saints roster, and I'm like, Shadur going there. Okay, so you have Olave, but he's got those concussion issues that he had last year, and that's worrying.
Yeah.
Trevor Penning hasn't been great at left tackle, so that's worrying. And we saw Shadur run for his life a lot in Colorado. Kamara's been good, but he's getting older. I don't know if it would be a good spot for Shadur, but I think, with Moore being an offensive coordinator, I think, there'd be some appeal, but I don't know. The Saints are tough to nail down, man.
They are because kind of like with the Raiders, you can kind of look up and down the roster and go, well, I could see a world where they take X position, right? Like they can kind of take whoever they really want here. Um, I think Kellen Moore. I think he is going to want a QB who can feasibly run an offense in his first season. And quite frankly, like, you think about the Saints here, could just see it being a world where they say we're one and done at head coach. If I'm Kellen Moore, there's no way. And I liked Spencer Rattler a year ago. There's no way I'm going to start my head coaching career with Spencer Rattler at quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah.
his injury is a thing, it's not like Derek Carr is great and all, but my goodness, I do not want Spencer Rattler, my week one starter. I think it is going to depend a little bit on what they can learn about that injury between then and now. I think that they could go corner, and I can see that because they trade away Lattimore. They could go the edge, Michael Williams also. They could go Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle as well. I could totally see that too. So like they
Yeah.
can kind of go down the board here a little bit, if, however they kind of see fit. I think I lean towards Shador here.
I think I kind of am too. I think the thing with Shadur is, if you're Kellen Moore, there's a couple things I think you like. Is that the accuracy and ball placement are really good, and just the recognition, the ability to recognize stuff pre-snap and post-snap, and throw with some anticipation. Now the arm strength isn't there. The pocket mobility. That's a question mark. But I think there's some things that you can point to Shadur and say like, hey, we can build on these things in my offense. And listen, with Kellen Moore and his track record as an offensive coordinator, he's done some good things. So I think if you're the Saints, I think you go with the quarterback there if he's here at number 9. But I also do wonder if they would entertain Jackson Dart here because like
Oh,
both because it feels like both have been right around QB2. It feels like for the last
yeah.
while here. I don't know. I feel like Dart is too rich for me to go at 9. I mean, we've seen crazier stuff happen in the draft, but I think I'm going to be with and say Shadur should be the pick here.
Yeah, I do too. And one thing I love about Kellen Moore, by the way, as an offensive coordinator, is he has been like forced into playing every type of offense you can think of, right? Like you could not have two more different offenses than what he just ran in Philly compared to what he ran in Dallas a few years ago, right? And you mentioned the accuracy, ball placement, that's all was very important to his offenses in Dallas. And I think, I think his Dallas offenses are more representative of what he is going to want to do as an offensive coordinator. In Philly, you had Saquon, you had Jalen Hurts. You didn't have a decision to make here. You had to run a certain style of offense for those guys. When you have a purely just like a ball of clay, and you say, okay, do what you want to with this ball of clay, and like all we have to help you with is Chris Olave. I think it's gonna look a lot more like the Dallas offense. So yeah, let's lock in Shadur Sanders here at 9, the New Orleans Saints. And that sends us here to the Chicago Bears, Ryan, at 10th overall. Ben Johnson, new offensive coordinator. I think what's interesting to me, Ryan, and this comes to you from like number one anti Swifty, is does Ben Johnson think DeAndre Swift is good enough to play the Jameer Gibbs role? Because that's the style of player that DeAndre Swift is. If you think that Ben Johnson's going to take some of the Lions offense and extrapolate it here, I would think that would mean DeAndre Swift is in the Gibbs role. They draft Caleb Johnson or Quinshon Judkins to be in the David Montgomery role, right? That is the Jamal Williams role. DeAndre Swift is the DeAndre Swift role. I personally feel like that's the case. I feel like if he drafted Genty, you now have two Gibbs. And I know that sounds really fun to a lot of people. I think to NFL coaches, no, you want one of each. I don't think you want two Gibbs. I think you want a Gibbs and you want a Demon. I personally think that kind of rules out Genty to the Bears. I just don't think it's a fit that makes a lot of sense. I think they desperately still need offensive line help, even despite the Joe and Jackson move and the Joe Tooney move, right? They've done some stuff for it already. I would still be leaning offensive line here, though. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the Bears?
Oh man, I thought about Janey here. I really did think about it. Yeah, because it feels like Ben Johnson. You see what them drafting Gibbs that high. Like okay, well they could go with him here. I mean, I think Tyler Warren could also be something here, but you got Cole Kmet. You can have a little bit of fun here. Get another receiving option for Caleb. And
Yeah.
Ben Johnson would love to see because Warren has that versatility that you saw
Sure.
at Penn State. I think he would just have so much fun just drawing all that stuff and just have stupid fun with that.
Does Luther Burden potentially make any sense here over Tet? And the reason I say this is because they already have Romo Dunze. They have their Tet.
hmm
So does Burden make any potential skyrocketing sense here?
I don't think he goes here.
Okay.
I don't think. I will also throw out edge, even though they did attack
Uh,
the defensive line. I think they could use another young guy. I don't know if Dio Odengbo is good enough out there on the edges. So I think somebody like Michael Williams could make a lot of sense here. A guy that was banged up last year with an ankle injury, but has looked really good throughout his career at Georgia. Or really, a really player out there. I think you can let him. You rotate him in there, and he kind of fits with those big edges. For Dennis Allen. It's a guy that's 6'5", 265, 270 that you can throw out there, and you have to imagine that he's going to be a lot better this year than last year because he's not going to be dealing with that nagging ankle. So I think Man, if you're good with edge, if
Yeah,
that could be an option, I think I'd go Michael Williams here. If you're not gonna go Janey, I would go Michael Williams.
I'm good. Let's lock that in.
All right. Because I think you can never have too much defensive help, and you need
Absolutely.
somebody alongside Sweat, and you need somebody young there. You need young talent at edge.
I completely agree. All right, on to number 11 here, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. And Ryan, I have my big brain pitch for you here. Are you ready for this?
Oh boy, here we go.
So, a year ago, the 49ers looked at their roster, they looked at their situation and said, hey, we're going to need a wide receiver here very soon. And they took Ricky Pierce on round one. This is a team who's not afraid to get out ahead of it if they see that they've got a piece they're about to move on from, right? Tyler Warren at tight end. I think Kittle's probably only got another year or two left on this roster. Tight end has been such an important piece to this offense. Tight end is a position that usually takes a guy a year to really like fit in, because they're just asked to do so much. Yeah, so Tyler Warren, he's a run for the catch kind of guy. Like you said, he's kind of a versatile piece. I think Shanahan would have a whole lot of fun with that. Um, yeah, that's my pitch for Tyler Warren here to the San Francisco 49ers.
Hmm.
It would be
Oh man,
annoying for a year, but then it would be fun.
that is true. I think the thing with the 49ers that I keep on coming back to, even though I think for them, even though Kittle's getting up there, I think for them, just with the deficiency in the trenches,
Yeah.
I think it'd be tough to take a luxury at number 11, taking this, even though Tyler Warren, Shanahan, like you said, would have so much fun with him in this offense. I think it would be, I think it would be tough. I feel like either offensive line or defensive line. Honestly, if Will Johnson were to fall this far, I could see him going here. I don't know if this is for where Johnny Barron could go. Maybe it's a little bit too early for him. But I think the trenches is where the 49ers, I think that's where they need to go with this first pick of theirs.
So are you thinking Kelvin Banks then on the offensive
Banks
side?
would be,
Shamar Stewart, Mike Green.
hmm.
Is that where you're leaning?
It's kind of where I'm leaning. The thing with Banks, though, okay, I could probably take that George Kittle Tyler Warren argument that you made, and I could probably apply it here because of Trent Williams.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, um,
And I'm trying to remember, Ryan, way back in the day, I think I remember making that argument. I'm trying to remember who their left tackle was at that point in time. I remember saying they should draft Mike McGlinchey, and they did, to be like a replacement of the future at tackle. And so that's fair too. And he can play right tackle. Is Banks the guy who can play right tackle for like a year and then move over to the left?
that I don't know if he can do. I don't know because it's strictly been left tackle for him. Now maybe he can be like a Joe Alt situation,
Right.
and you can put him out there at right tackle. I don't know. That could be a question. The thing with him is I've heard him maybe moving to guard more than like going
Oh,
to like right
sure.
tackle. That would still fit a need because you need help on the offensive line. Um,
No, I'm all for that then. Yeah, if he can get kick in for a year to guard, let Trent Williams then retire and then kick back out to left tackle. I mean, we've seen that happen a million times, right? Where these offensive line pieces, as a rookie, you kind of get put where you can get put, and then you find your spot in year two. Yeah, we've seen that happens 100 times a year.
yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. Banks it is
Yeah.
a as one of the better left tackles. He played all 3 years. At left tackle is really good for Texas. So yeah, I say he's a long term replacement plan for Trent Williams, and let him play at guard. Help that offensive line a little bit, and then put him at left tackle. Now we're at the Dallas Cowboys, Matt.
Yeehaw! How about them Cowboys?
Oh boy,
Oh boy,
yuck.
Ryan.
Well,
I mean, this is the spot where everyone is going to be yelling at their TV. Take Ashton Genty, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, if this is what happened, which by the way, we might be I think this is showing Ryan the fact that I had influence here because I am very much kind of a wait on running back guy in the NFL draft. Um, and so the fact that Ashton Genty is still here at 12, I feel like I'm partly, a culprit here. Um, this is the spot though.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a spot. It's a spot that
If
they
if
got a
it's
need
not,
here.
if it's not, let's just play a fun game because it is. We're locking in Ashton Genty.
Yeah.
It's probably then Ted McMillan if it's not, because they could really use a second guy there. Brandon Cooks is back in New Orleans, completing the circle of life on his career. So Ted McMillan would go opposite of CD Lamb.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably throw in Warren here too. Just all
Sure,
the offensive skill position
I like
players.
Burks,
Uh. Yeah.
but yeah,
If Janie wasn't here,
it's
I
Jenny.
would agree that I would think it would be. I think McMillan would be a good candidate to go here.
All right,
But yeah,
well, guess what though? Ashton Genty's on the board. Now he's off the board.
yeah,
All right, Miami Dolphins. So obviously they can always do offensive line, try to keep their quarterback upright. Corner is definitely a need for them as well, though. Their very good cornerback core of the past is now of the past and old and done and gone. They could really use some help there, Ryan. You mentioned a couple picks ago. Is it JD Barron? Is that how you say his name? Um, does that pick make sense here?
yeah. I mean, I take a look at Miami. I think they're probably one of the teams that's upset that Calvin Banks went early because it feels like that would be a good pick for them. I think it also just depends on how much trust they have with Patrick Paul moving out to left tackle with seemingly no Teron Armstead coming back. Um,
Oh yeah, I forgot about the Armstead news.
so
Oh, yeah, poor Miami. Oh no, they could go.
I'm.
They could really use that tackle. I am
But also, I
still
mean,
scrolling. There's one.
yeah, I feel like if Banks is still here, maybe they could put him at left tackle, or maybe they do what we suggested the 49ers do and put him at guard and let Paul work at left tackle if they trust him. Um, Defensive tackle would be a good pick here too, because they got a need there, but their secondary is, I feel like it is decimated. They lost Javon Holland. And I know it's not a
Yep.
corner, but it's a safety, but
Still
they
part
need
of
some
the
help
second.
back there.
Yep.
Yeah, they need some help here. I'm good with John A. Barron. One comp I saw for him, Matt, and I thought I was like, this makes a lot of sense because he's a guy that can play inside and out as a real feisty physical guy was Trent McDuffie.
Oh, I think you're gonna say Marlon Humphrey. Oh,
No.
but that fits too, though. Yeah, that fits that description.
So I'm with you there. They need some help back there. Jalen Ramsey is not getting any younger. So
Right.
let's go corner here for Miami.
All right, and that brings us
Now,
to the Indianapolis Colts. And Ryan,
yeah,
I believe almost every mock I've seen has them taking a tight end, whether it be
yeah.
Colton Loveland or Tyler Warren. I think literally every mock draft I have read has them taking a tight end. So, do we just fall right in line here and go tight end?
Yeah, yeah.
So Tyler Warren is the pick.
Yeah, Tyler Warren is the pick here.
If
It makes a lot of sense.
if Tyler Warren was off the board, would you have gone Colson Loveland this high?
Probably.
Okay, there
That's
you
what I'm
go.
doing.
All right, on to the Atlanta Falcons here. They most likely are going with Michael Penix as their quarterback moving forward. Most likely not going back to Kirk Cousins. The defense is a bit of a mess. Offensively, I think they could use another receiver, right? Darnell Mooney was like pretty good for them actually, but like it's Darnell Mooney, it's 2025. Like, come on, guys. But I don't see it happening here though. I see this probably being one of those defenders.
I think so, but it's a question of which defender because they could go a couple different ways here. Shamar Stewart's on the board, Mike Green's on the board, Jahad Campbell's on the board, and Campbell's another one of those off-ball linebackers that can play some edge here. And his stock, but he has dealt with a torn labrum recently, and that can maybe drop him down here. But yeah, I think Atlanta. Man, how many years now has it been that how many years has it been that we said Atlanta needs a pass rusher and
I
it
feel like
hasn't happened?
I remember penciling in Brian Orakpo to the Atlanta Falcons. And I think it goes
Oh
all the way
man,
back to them.
oh man,
I think I remember typing that into a Microsoft. It wouldn't have been a Google spreadsheet because that doesn't exist yet. So it would have been into a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. I feel like I remember
oh,
doing that, or maybe I just wrote down in a notebook in high school and in class in the middle of class. So I would say whatever year it was, Brian Orakpo was drafted. It's been that many years that I've said the Falcons need a pass rush.
oh man, they need one so desperately. They need one. But I mean, they could also use help on the interior. They did lose Grady Jarrett. You know, they let him go.
That was
I,
2009. Oh no, I'm old. Oh dear. I was a freshman.
oh man, man,
Oh
I will bring
yeah.
up a player here, and I will make the case for him. Mike Green, out of Marshall.
Okay.
Um, in big games, I believe he played. You know, he transferred to Ohio State. He's got a couple of off the field issues here that teams are, questioning. Like, okay, how serious are they? Um, and that could be a reason why he's down here at 15. But he played against some big time opponents. He played against Ohio State, and he actually looked really good against their competition. Um, so if he's able to do well against Ohio State, and they got an NFL level left tackle in Josh Simmons in this draft, if you're able to do that against this offensive line against Ohio State, and are able to just be able to wreak havoc, I think that says something about you as an edge rusher. He's 6'3", 250. Is a guy that has a lot of twitch in his game. The get off is crazy. He's got different plans here to go and attack. I think for Atlanta, listen, you got an edge rusher here. At Marshall, he got double digit sacks. So I think you go with the guy here that has got some twitch off the edge. I would also say Jahad Campbell, it could be a candidate here because he offers some versatility. But I think you got to get a true edge rusher here. I think you go with the guy out of Marshall and get Mike Green to help you out. And finally, address pass rush. It's been really wanting one, needing one since 2009.
I I guess they did have Jonathan Abraham there for a minute. But yeah, other than that, they did. So let's lock in Mike Green out of Marshall. I'm not gonna lie, he's out of Marshall. I don't know who that is. Um I unfortunately, Ryan, I did not get to catch any Marshall football games this past fall. I know that's a shocker to you. Let's go on to the Arizona Cardinals. So last year picked Marvin Harrison Jr. very highly because they
Mm-hmm.
need a wide receiver. One could argue that despite that draft pick, they still could use a wide receiver. Um, but edge rusher, corner, also a couple of top needs here. Um, they feel like the Shamar Stewart that you mentioned quite a bit there, along with Green. I feel like that probably makes a whole lot of sense here at 16.
Yeah, I think, wide receiver, like you said, is not out of the question here. I could see, I don't know if Tet would be the fit here,
No, it'd
with
be a
Marvin
weird fit.
Harrison. I think Golden would be what would make more sense here for Arizona. But, I mean, I think defender, they need another edge rusher. They did add Josh Sweat, but I think you can never have too many.
Yep.
Um, and build up that defense, build up that front seven. I will say though, they could also use a defensive tackle. and there's some good ones on the board. Walter Nolan's still on the board. Derek Harmon's still on the board. Mason Graham's running mate, Kenneth Grant, is still on the board. You can make a case for either one of those guys. Stewart, though, has been a guy that's off the charts athletically. It's just that the production, it was not there at A&M. It just was not there. So you're going to be taking a bet, but it does kind of fit that profile that what has here, with Darius Robinson last year, with Sweat this year. Maybe you just double down and you go with that type of pass rusher, or maybe you go with a guy like Jahad Campbell that offers a little bit of versatility, can play linebacker, and can be a guy that you can send off the edge as a little bit different body type. Uh, but I'm okay with Shamar Stewart here. I think if you're going with that trend, why not go at somebody else and maybe just like I feel like with Robinson and Stewart, you can probably play them inside and out, and you can have some fun packages there. So I think, yeah, I'll go with Shamar Stewart here. I'll
All right,
like
Shamar
it in.
Stewart out of Texas A&M, the pass rusher. And that gets us to the Cincinnati Bengals at 17, who are shaking their fist at the sky and saying, we could have really used a pass rusher. How dare you? And oh, by the way, Ted McMillan, who looks a whole lot like T. Higgins, is on the board, and we just re-signed T. Higgins for a whole boat of money. Ryan, this is the most easy defensive decision pick here, right? Like, I am as much of a fan of you take the best player on the board as you can. This is a circumstance though that you have to go away from that. I
Mm,
don't know who. I'll let you go through the weeds on this, but it's got to be on the defensive side, right? Like Matthew Golden would be incredibly fun.
yeah,
Colson Loveland would also be very fun, but no, this
he
has to be
would. Yeah, he would. I mean, the Trey Hendrickson thing has been something to monitor because we didn't know if he traded or if he was going to stay there and resign. As of right now, he's still in Cincinnati. But the need a defender, and they did add a couple of defenders. They did bring back B.J. Hill. T.J. Slayton is coming back too. But I still think you could use some help on the interior. They did Chris Jenkins, but I think you can use some help there. Man, I'm going to make the case for a safety here.
okay. Yeah.
I'm going to make the case for a safety here. Nick Emenwari and Malachi Starks, two SEC safeties. Emenwari is kind of a versatile unicorn in a sense because he's 6'3", 220, lit the combine on fire, and looks like a guy that could be Derwin James type of guy with just like how big and explosive he is. Malachi Starks, a guy at Georgia. Listen, in recent years, smart to take defenders. Take a strategy out of the Philadelphia Eagles playbook and get a guy at safety. They need some help there, and you lose Jesse Bates a couple years ago. That was a big loss for him. So I think you go and take a look at. I mean, they could also use a corner here too. Man, I'm gonna go with the incredibly versatile safety Nick Emenwari here. I'm gonna make my case for him is because he's big, he's fast, he can run. The versatility is there. He's got a high IQ, and can play anywhere on the defense. Um, it will be just kind of a struggle to figure out where he fits in with the defense. It's a new defense, Lou Anarumo's not there anymore, but I'm going to make the case for a safety here. I'm going to make a case for Emenwari to be the pick here and add a potentially a big time safety prospect to that Cincinnati defense that needs one.
So I am with you for two reasons. Three reasons actually. Number one, you said the name Derwin James. Anytime you want to compare a player to Derwin James, I'm going to like melt a little bit and I'm gonna get really happy. Number two, they've got Geno Stone, who I think is a really good like center fielder. I mean, he was a Raven safety. I'm not gonna call him Ed Reed, but like he is of the deep safety style. So you want that opposite side of things. Ryan, you compared him to Derwin James. Can I make a comparison that I feel like is a guy who is comparable to Derwin James? Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
sure.
you
I
mentioned
yeah,
Lou Amarillo is now gone from Cincinnati. Ryan, do you know who their new defensive coordinator is in Cincinnati?
Al Golden.
Who was defensive coordinator for Notre Dame, where Kyle Hamilton went to college. If he is any way resembles Kyle Hamilton, I think that is an amazing, amazing fit.
You
This
know,
other Ryan,
I almost just did the Brian Windhorst meme, and it was just like, you know,
well, you know, these conversations we've had, I feel like we've had this exact same conversation like 3 or 4 times now of like putting together the pieces of these players and the styles and the prototypes they are with the pieces these coaches would like. And I think that's an aspect of the draft that just gets so much overlooked. Is the styles of these players fitting these systems and fitting this coaching staff. So yeah, absolutely. If this is a kid who in any way represents Derwin James, who Kyle Hamilton is a similar player to, if you can put him with a defensive coordinator who had a Kyle Hamilton in his system for a few years there at Notre Dame, I think that's an amazing marriage.
we're going there, number
Yeah.
18 or number 17 rather.
Yep.
All right,
So
Seattle at number 18. Now, I
yeah,
feel like, you mentioned the Kyle Hamilton. I feel like Mike McDonald coming from that branch, I feel like that would be something he'd be intrigued by. But now that he's off the board, we're at Seattle now, who's had an interesting offseason, to
to,
to say the
to say the
least.
least. Oh, yeah, yeah. They've had some moves happen this offseason. In comes Sam Darnold to be their quarterback. Out goes Geno Smith. In comes Cooper Cup. Out goes Tyler Lockett. So you're swapping old guys here. I guess at least this old guy plays a slot. I guess. I could see where they want to open this thing up and go Matthew Golden and add some speed to this offense because they need some speed in this offense. Like
Mm-hmm.
JSN's pretty good, but he doesn't really bring that to you. They could use some offensive line, but really the board hasn't fallen that way for him at all. I mean, if you want to go with Josh Simmons, that's a name I'm seeing here. Gray Zabel is I believe how you say it.
Yeah,
The
Tyler
pride of
Booker.
pride of Fargo, North Dakota up here, North Dakota State. Uh yeah, I don't know, Ryan. I don't know where in the world to go for this. I guess Noah Fant is a name that's like recognizable enough to where I was like, oh, they probably won't go tight end. They could definitely go Colson Loveland here and kick Noah Fant to the curb.
They definitely could. Because McDonald's has got some Michigan ties too. Um,
Oh
but
yeah, I forget
uh,
about that.
but but I think I remember they took AJ Barner, who's from Michigan last year,
Yeah.
who was productive. So I don't know. Um, I think interior offensive line and wide receiver are probably the two needs here. And the thing with Seattle, they got a bunch of picks to mess around with and just kind of figure out what they want to do.
I mentioned before that Tet and when I talked with Carolina and Dave Canales and DK Metcalf history, DK's gone. Could Tet kind of slot right into that role of the offense?
I think it depends on where you want to put Cup and JSN.
Well, if you keep JSN where you kept JSN last year, and DK now becomes Tet, you tell Cooper Cup you're old, you're a part-time player. And then MVS, he's your Tyler Lockett. I don't know why they signed Cooper Cup. I have no idea why they signed Cooper Cup. But MVS is Tyler Lockett of 2025 Tyler or 2024 Tyler Lockett, MVS could do that. And so if Ted can be DK and JSN just still is JSN, I don't know why they have Cooper Cup. I just don't know.
Matt, I think I'm gonna go. I think my preference of the wide receivers here. I think this is where I want to go. I think Matthew Golden.
Okay.
I,
It brings a whole new element that offense does not have at all.
it does. And this guy, I mean, he really came on last year. He really came on and was really kind of like the de facto go-to guy for Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense compared to Isaiah Bond, who they were probably expecting to be that go-to guy. This guy, I mean, explosive big play threat, was able to catch pretty much anything that went his way. Short area quickness, really good. So I think, yeah, you add some speed to this offense, get Sam Darnold some help, and get a wide receiver in here that can add some explosiveness. We saw what having good wide receivers can do for them in Minnesota, whether that's a product of the Cal O'Connell offense or not. But you get good receivers for Sam Darnold. So it's like, okay, we got you some weapons here. you know, we got you a guy that's really fast. We got you JSN, who's really good, and we got you Cooper Cup.
Who can
Have
catch
at it,
the
you
ball?
know. Yeah.
Cooper Cup can at least catch the ball. I don't know what else he can do anymore. He can catch it though.
Now, I tell you what. I mean, I feel like for their first two picks, and they got two second rounders. I feel like they could go wide receiver, interior offense line, or do the opposite.
Hmm.
Here too. I feel like Booker or Zabel could be a pick here, but I think Golden should be the pick here.
Well, that will then bring us to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here at number 19. Baker Mayfield has reignited this offense over the last couple of years. Defense, all those guys who were like old but really good still during the Brady years are all gone now. So they probably need to reload this defense a little bit. Jahad Campbell is a guy who I've seen going to Tampa quite a bit. Ryan, what say you?
I say I like it. I like it.
Okay.
He's a guy I've had to go to Tampa, and he really kind of. So Son Reddick, you bring him in, which I forgot that was one probably the first signing I saw. I was like, oh, there's the Son Reddick to Tampa. Okay,
Forgot
you know
about
a
him.
guy that a guy that had a really volatile past season with his contract and. He goes to Tampa, but they help. And also, like, listen, if you're drafting a linebacker too, Levante David's still playing.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
not getting any younger. So I think you go with a guy that can be a versatile piece in your defense, and you go take Campbell, who can play linebacker, you can play edge. I think you take it. You add a young piece of your defense. I feel like if one of the corners was here, that could be where they could go. I could
Yeah.
also see a Malachi Starks maybe being an option here, but I think you need some help here up front. You need some juice up front. So now we're at Denver.
Oh, one
And
second.
this one's an interesting one.
Yes, because this is a team who man, what a good defense they've had. And you have Sean
Yes.
Payton there as coach, so you know he is going to will that offense be something. Bo Nix, I wasn't a Bo Nix guy. I'm still not really a Bo Nix guy, but I was very impressed by him last year. The
Yes.
mobility, I jokingly call him mile high or mountain time Daniel Jones is what I like to kind of call him. But when I say that, I mean like he's like 2022 Daniel Jones. Like he's
Yeah.
like about
Okay.
to get the
Yeah.
contract Daniel Jones. Not like the rest of Daniel Jones, but like peak Daniel Jones is Bo Nix currently. So it's actually kind of a compliment. Um I could see the fact that Tet has fallen this far. I mean, stylistically, I think him and Cortland Sutton have a lot in common. Um, but they could just use the body at this point. Colson Loveland is there too, though, and you know Sean Payton loves his tight ends. At this point, is there a reason to have an O'Marion Hampton conversation, perhaps? And then also they could just add on to that defense. You mentioned the other safety earlier. Uh, those are kind of the guys who I'm thinking here.
I think if you're Denver, if the board has fallen this way, I think you're like, man, oh man, do we have a tough choice here? But I think you're also really thrilled that you had this many choices here to go with. Where you could go Hampton here, you could go Tet here, you could also go Loveland, or you could go and add to that defense. Continue to build and make that a strength, and go add a defensive tackle to help out with Gallen, who was a beast for Denver last year. Um, man, I tell you what,
I will say Cortland Sutton is a free agent after this season.
okay, that's a good
Um,
point.
that to me leans McMillan.
I'm cool to go with that. I'm cool to go with that route.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of the classic. You get him in the room now, so you can let the old guy go in a year situation.
Yeah, I'm good with it. McMillan to 20. His drop stops there.
All right, here we go. Someone call Peter Lewis. The Pittsburgh Steelers are on the clock. They ain't gone to the Super Bowl. They gone to the podium, and they're sitting here looking around, going, "Well, are we really gonna do Mason Rudolph? No, no, we're not." I guess the question really is, do they have a wink wink relationship with Aaron Rodgers, right? Like, if you have Rodgers coming in a month from now, do you really want to spend your first round pick on Jackson Dart, or do you want to go ahead and take O'Marion Hampton? I guess do you make the Najee Harris mistake again? Um, Gosh, what a crap franchise this team is right now. They are such the St. Louis Cardinals of football. They are so the St. Louis Cardinals of football. Like, what in the world? I don't know,
Oh, what
Ryan.
a franchise like this deserves a punter at 21.
Let me see if I can find one real quick here on the mock draft
Uh,
app I'm using here. Let me click punter. I got
and
Jeremy Crawshaw out of Florida. Do you want to go ahead and send him to Peter?
yeah, might as well.
What's about long snappers? I got Austin Brinkman. You know, are there any Seattle players
Um,
in the draft pool, Ryan?
I
Do you have any Red Hawks we can give Peter?
I don't know. I haven't seen any mentioned, so
Mm,
I don't know. That's unfortunate. That would have been the first pick right there.
absolutely.
Weirdly
I
enough,
don't
a lot of
know.
the punters I'm seeing are from the SEC. That's weird.
Interesting.
That's weird.
All right.
Um,
I think Jackson Dart is probably with the roster currently constructed what makes the most sense. But the question is, do they have a wink wink deal with Aaron Rodgers? In which case, I don't think you should spend your first round pick on a quarterback.
I don't know because I think. I mean, here's the thing with the Steelers though; they don't have a second round pick, and so do want a developmental quarterback, you're gonna have to wait till round 3. And
It's
one time
true.
all this could be gone. So
Um, they let
this
they let
franchise.
Najee go. They let Najee go. Did they sign anyone? Or is it just Jalen Warren in there right now?
Um, did they sign Kenneth Gainwell?
Yes.
I
Yes. Yes, they did.
okay,
Yes.
yeah,
Yep. All right. So at
yeah.
least you have a second guy on the depth chart. Man, what a mess this team is in. I guess I'm okay with just clicking the Jackson Dart button, I guess, but like
I am
I
too.
in no way feel confident about that one. This is
I,
probably
I
the worst I felt about any team.
I mean anything to just move off from the Steelers.
I mean, like, well, okay, so brought in DK. You got DK and Pickens. You've got Fryermuth. The defense really isn't all that good. It's just got TJ Watt, really. That really is covering up a lot of problems on a defense. So you mentioned the other Michigan guy earlier. Is that a possibility here?
I mean, I think so. Cameron Hayward, he's not getting any younger either,
Yeah.
but he's still doing good.
I don't know, Ryan. It's up to you. Do we just want to do Jackson Dart and move on with our lives?
Yeah, let's just do Jackson Dart. Let's just move on
Okay.
from the from this firestorm
Because
of a
he's a
franchise.
quarterback, because he's a quarterback, Ryan, give me a little background on Jackson Dart as a player.
Okay, so I mean the Lane Kiffin offense, which I mean it's funny to bring up Lane Kiffin because of the day of all days. Feel like Tennessee's quarterback left like Lane Kiffin did. So which reminds me, somebody made a nice Photoshop of Kiffin the day he left Tennessee and put Nico Iamaleava's head on Kiffin. So I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then Kiffin retweeted it.
Oh,
So I thought that that's a little bit that's funny there. No, Dart, he does have a little bit of mobility game. Um, he's 6'23", so he's big for a quarterback. I thought he was going to weigh a little bit less. Um, I think just the Lane Kiffin offense and just the reads, and I think just that offense in general, it kind of Tennessee like in some ways. But there's some things I like. I mean, he's a pretty good thrower. He's got that mobility. He's got some athleticism. That can make for for him going to New Orleans there. I think that kind of fits more of the Kellen Moore kind of profile, I think, more than Shadur. I feel like if you're Pittsburgh, that would be kind of what you're getting there. I think it would help having two receivers for the moment, two receivers like Pickens and DK that he could throw to.
Okay, there you go. That's Jackson Dart. Ryan picking at 22 is the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think this is going to be interesting because I feel like two Michigan players being kind of the top of the board here is really going to be like pulling on Jim Harbaugh a little bit of do I go Colson Loveland or do I go Kenneth Grant here? Tight end or defensive line, these are two things both that Michigan could use, or not Michigan, they might as well be Michigan. Both two things the LA Chargers could use a lot of. I feel like Colson Loveland might be the spot to go here because they have an offensive coordinator in Greg Roman, who
You can make a case for tight end. They did sign Tyler Conklin, and they do have Will Disley, so that kind of gives them some insurance there. But
I
that's not going to preclude you from drafting Colson Loveland, who, as a tight end, is a really great pass catcher. Not so.
and by the
I don't
way,
know if
this is Greg Roman offense, so three tight ends is nothing surprising to see on the field.
no, no, it's not. Yeah, Loveland is. I think he could get better as a blocker because he comes from Michigan, and Michigan's a really physical team up front. But Loveland just knows where's to be all the time. He knows, the holes in the defense, where to attack. His hands are really good. He can get to that second level. It'd be really hard to pass up another, a guy to help out Herbert. But also Kenneth Grant can really help out this defense that needs some help up front. You don't have Joey Bosa. Need some help in the interior. But if Colson Loveland is on the board here at 22, I've leaned him to the Chargers.
Yep, I do agree. And for fantasy, I think that would be incredibly a fun idea.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Lad McConkey, you have him in place. Why not get another pass catcher for Herbert? They go and have some fun with. And again, the Michigan connection, you can't deny it. I mean, it would certainly help out.
Yep. All right, Green Bay Packers, Ryan, picking at number 23 overall here. The Jair Alexander situation still kind of up in the air, I think. So corner could be in play. I've been proponent they could use some wide receiver help, but quite frankly, I think most of them are off the board that makes sense at this point. Offensive line is also a spot. Excuse me, the offensive line is also a spot they could definitely use, and I think your guy Malachi Starks though is also an option here.
Yeah, I think, offensive line is a good spot that they could go with here. You got some guys available that make sense at this spot. And they could move Jordan Morgan inside. They're doing some shifting with the offense line. It's not a sexy pick, but I mean, if you want to help protect Jordan Love, who you're now paying boatloads of millions of dollars, it would be a smart investment. Josh Simmons from Ohio State, true left tackle, did get banged up though, but he was playing some really good football last year for Ohio State rather. I'm already mocking him to the Green Bay, so I guess we might as well.
There you
If I'm
go.
already doing that, might as well.
Josh
Um,
Simmons.
yeah, Josh Simmons. I could also see, an interior line, defensive lineman. I could see that because Ken, Kenny Clark, and then you got Wyatt there on the inside. You could use some help there. On the edges, you could definitely use some help there. I don't know if you want to take the Boston College pass rusher. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because I know I'm going to butcher it. But you could probably take him here. I think Josh Simmons makes a lot of sense, and you protect your investment, and you build up through the trenches. I think Again, the Green Bay crowd there is probably not going to be like, "Oh, I'm excited about this," but you know, I'll tell you what would get them really riled up if they did draft a wide receiver here. They just waited all these years until
Yeah.
the draft was in Green Bay.
Let me tell you, the spotted cow would be flowing if they took a wide receiver. Especially if they traded up and like got like one of the big dogs, right? Like if they trade up and got
Oh
10,
man.
that place would explode. I already pushed the button on Simmons, Ryan. So I am locked in on us doing that. Takes us on to pick number 24 here, the Minnesota Vikings. I would have had this probably be an O'Marion Hampton spot if not for the Jordan Mason trade about a month ago now. Malachi Starks, once again, probably makes a lot of sense here. Kenneth Grant as well. You've mentioned Walter Nolan as another defensive lineman. Probably any of those options on the defense. Offensively, I guess you could go O line if you want to here from Minnesota.
I think defense makes sense here. Now, here's the thing, Matt. Would you say the signings of Jonathan Allen and what was it, Javon Hargrave, does that
Yeah.
preclude you from taking a defensive tackle here if you're Minnesota?
No, because they're old. And I always view very much in a Baltimore Ravens kind of way of I am not drafting my needs, I am drafting the talent. So to me, I would not let an old Jonathan Allen or an older Javon Hargrave stop me from taking a more talented defensive tackle. But I do think that Malachi Starks here makes a ton of sense as well at
Yeah,
safety.
that's kind of where I'm leaning. I just wanted to ask the question and
No,
see kind of where
it
your
wouldn't.
head.
Those sorts of veteran signings, especially unless it's at a position where you only play one guy, right? If it's at quarterback, really, that's really one spot. Other than that, if I've got a guy on my roster who's in his 30s, I don't think that's ever stopping me from drafting a player at his position. If that's the guy, I'm a year away from that being my starter. If I really think he's the guy, there's nothing wrong with a rookie first round pick getting kind of rotated in a little bit, right? Well, I mentioned Geno
Yeah,
Stone earlier with the Bengals for the Kyle Hamilton's rookie year. He kind of rotated in because Geno Stone was still
yeah,
around.
that's true.
Right? And then he played really well in those limited minutes, and then he's a full-fledged all-pro starter a year later. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of times people put way too much weight on like veteran starters. We mentioned it with Cortland Sutton earlier with the Broncos, right? Like if Cortland Sutton's a year away from free agency, even though him and Tet are similar players, I would never let that stop me in that situation because I'm a year away then from having my new Cortland Sutton just step into that role, right? So no, it wouldn't stop me. But in this scenario, I think Malachi Starks, hey, a Georgia defender is always a good idea too.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's where they go here. Yeah, they add a safety. I'm with you there. Malachi Starks going to the Vikings, who need some secondary help in a really bad way, and add somebody else. They did lose Cam Bynum, so you got a replacement there. You got a need there. So yeah, and like you said, you can never go wrong with the Georgia defender. As much as that pains me to say it, oh, that it sucks. It truly sucks. But we go to Houston at 25, who they have been in the news too. You traded Laramie Tunzel. Uh, you you have a need on the offensive line. You did sign Cam Robinson, but I don't think it precludes you from taking a guy here. I feel like if Simmons was on the board, this could make some sense. But honestly, they could use an offensive lineman or a wide receiver here, even though they did bring in Christian Kirk. Tank Dell's injury was, as gruesome as it was, I don't think he's going to play this year. So you're going to need, I think, somebody opposite of Nico Collins there. But again, the offensive line, you need some help there. You saw how bad it was last year where Stroud just kept on getting sacked. It's just, you need. So do you go with somebody like, I don't know, like a Josh Connerly, or do you go with Zabel or Tyler Booker, or is this a Luther Burden spot? Is this a Mecca Buka? Well, Matt, where's your head at with Minnesota at this pick?
I think one thing I think is a fascinating, just like philosophical question is the offensive lineman from North Dakota State versus an offensive lineman from Alabama, right? Like you cannot get further apart here at the end of round one here of program background there. I think Egbuka would be an interesting pick. I think it's a real bummer about Tank Dell being hurt. And like you said, he's gonna
Yes.
miss this whole year. And quite frankly, I don't know what we can count on seeing him out of him ever again, right? Like, I think he'll probably come back and play, but will he be Tank Dell ever again? At that point, he's gonna be in year four, so he's gonna be in a walk year anyway. I think that makes Ibuka or Luther Burden, either one of those two, interesting. I think Burden probably could slot better into the offense in a Tank Dell type role than
Yeah.
Igbuka could, but would they want Christian Kirk to kind of be a 1 year stopgap in the slot and then figure that out down the road? In which case, you're going perimeter guy and you're going to Igbuka, right? So I think that's kind of the question to me is which one of those two guys would they rather have? I don't remember who their offensive coordinator is now because they let Bobby Slowick go. But
I'm not
that
sure.
Houston Texans offensive coordinator is Nick Caley. He was a passing game coordinator for the LA Rams. Okay. Luther Burden to me feels like an LA Rams type of player, kind of that spacious, get him out in space type of wide receiver. I think Burden would probably be, but man, you got to keep him upright though. And they have just like shipped out offensive linemen, like there's no tariffs so far this offseason, like they are
Yeah.
really moving those guys out. So the two interior O linemen there, Zabel and Booker, I think you probably got to look at those guys.
Also throw another guy, Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. I'll throw him out here too. He is a guard, but when Josh Simmons went down, he went to left tackle. And I'll tell you what, he held his own. There's a couple struggles. Abdul Carter did a couple times in the Penn State game, but Abdul Carter's a top 3 pick.
Right.
So, I mean, that's to be expected. But at left tackle, he held his own out there and was starting out there for the rest of the season and was playing there in the championship game. So I think if you're the Texans, I think you take a guy that shown like, hey, he can play left tackle in the pinch if you need him to. But I think you plug him into left guard, right guard. You plug him in there, and like you're going to get a long-term starter there at that position that has a really good football IQ and offers that versatility and play at one of those high prestigious colleges. And you got the Ohio State Stroud connection, I think. So I think you can add him to the list.
Question for you on that: did Stroud overlap with Ibuka?
Think he might have.
Yeah,
I'm
but
trying
it
to
would have
think.
been like a part role.
I think I'm trying to think because you got the whole 5 year thing.
Well,
I
in
think Ibuka could have gone.
the transfer free agency, right?
I would say probably a safe bet. Yes,
Okay.
at some point, but not a long time. I think it was probably just a brief, like maybe a 1 year period.
Yeah. But if he has
But
trust with Jackson, because they definitely, the Texans, I think it's very interesting. They value CJ Stroud's opinion, in a way that, let's say the Packers didn't for Aaron Rodgers, right? I like your Donovan Jackson pick. I'm cool locking that in, Donovan Jackson.
All right, yeah. I think that would be a really smart pick for them. You gotta dress it up front, and he's a good left guard. He's a really rock solid left guard, and you got to keep your guy upright. You got to keep him upright, or otherwise he's not going to throw those bombs to Nico Collins, once or twice per game.
Yep.
So we're at the Rams at 26, and none of the quarterbacks are here. And the Rams, they had a really good rookie class last year. Really good rookie class led by Verse. Let's see if they can try to replicate that. The Rams, as far as what they need, I think corner is where I initially look at. And you're in the spot here in the late first round where you could see these corners start to go. Guys like Azariah Thomas, Maxwell Harrison, Benjamin Morrison, uh, Ravel Jr. from East Carolina. You could start to see some of those guys go. I don't know, Matt. You take a look at the Rams heading into this year, and you take a look at what their kind of needs are with and you don't have a shot at a quarterback here. Where do you kind of land here? Do you address this defense, continue to build upon it for Chris Shula, or do you go and try to help out the offense a little bit more?
So the Rams offense is super old, right? Like it's Stafford, it's Devontae Adams, my boy Tyler Higbee, Rob Havenstein. Like it's super old. But honestly though, like it's still pretty good. And I feel like to take any of the offensive players except for the interior O line, you're probably reaching a bit at this point. Maybe Hampton also, but they don't need that with Kyron. So honestly,
Right.
we talked about Kenneth Grant like 10 picks ago. I feel like the fact that he's still on the board, maybe that's just the Baltimore Ravens in me and they're one pick away, but that's where I would lean is like, look, if this guy was a candidate 10 picks ago and he's still here, that probably makes a whole lot of sense, even though it's not necessarily a guy we need. Same with another pass rusher. Your guy James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. I think that becomes an option. I think if they want to go receiver, I think Luther Burden probably makes more sense than Ibuka for the Rams, because Cooper Cup is in Seattle doing something. Uh, you know, Luther Burden there. I think you mentioned the offensive tackle out of Oregon, the corners. I could see those options too. For me, the defensive tackle out of Michigan makes a lot of sense.
I think where I think for me, they do have Kobe Turner and they do have Fisk there, so I kind of feel like I don't know if that would be. I think if you didn't have one of them, you run to the podium. You run to the podium and you take them. Um, Rams are a tricky one because I could see them taking one of the interior linemen. I could see them taking a guy like Zabel that has some versatility, and I think Sean McVay could really see that and like, okay, we got a guy that can play guard, can play center, can maybe potentially play some tackle here a little bit. I don't know if Tyler Booker would be a fit for a Sean offense. Um, I think I want to go with another interior lineman here, which I don't know. Maybe it's the Titans fan in me, since that's what we like to do. I think I would lean towards Gray Zabel
Okay, that's the kid
from
out of
North
North Dakota
Dakota
State.
State.
How about that? Over the Alabama kid, Ryan. You're breaking my heart.
Listen, I don't care. The less first round picks Alabama has, the better. Um,
Ryan. We get to the Baltimore Ravens.
kick right.
Unfortunately, it could be. I think, like I just said, Kenneth Grant is a guy who probably should have been off the board by now. And classically, that's what the Ravens do. If a guy's there who probably just shouldn't be there, the Ravens then take him. And I love that that's how we built this team. So I'm totally cool with that being the pick. I do want to quickly throw out, probably not really for this pick, but Omarion Hampton. I just feel like it's more a conversation about pick 59, really, for the Ravens. Is could I see that being a running back? Because this offense is so built on the run, and Henry being yet another year older, man, if something happened to him last year, this offense would have been so up a creek. And Grant Keaton Mitchell is fully back now, but like he didn't get a chance to play last year at all. Justice Hill's a nice pass catcher. I would just really feel better about this Ravens offense if they had something behind Derrick Henry. So I don't think it's the move at 27. I really don't. I think those guys we mentioned at the top of the show are much more in play for pick 59. I mean, Cam Scatabo, even at pick 91, would be like pretty incredible, right? Like, can you imagine? Oh my gosh, dude. We are so tired from trying to tackle Derrick Henry 20 times. Oh, good. The backup's coming in. Oh, it's it's this massive man in Cam Scatabo now that we have to try to tackle him. But I think Kenneth Grant here, Ryan. What say you?
Here, I think defensive tackle. It could be a sneaky need here, but I think you
Guard
it's
is
the right.
definitely a need too. Like Tyler Booker makes a lot of sense in that regard too.
He does. But yeah, I think it makes sense. He got the fallen this far. But I will also say, I think Walter Nolan could make some sense here because he's been getting some buzz here. I think it's just like the infrastructure to be in. Um, I think the Ravens would make some sense because that's a really good infrastructure here. I'll go with Kenneth Grant though because they do have there's some Michigan ties still there,
Yeah.
and Grant is he's a really good player. He move at 6'3", 331. He's an athletic guy too. So I'm pairing with Matabuke. Oh, just have some fun on the interior of that defensive line.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing the Ravens just absolutely would love to do. All right, Detroit Football Lions here, Ryan. The defense is kind of starting to leave them a little bit, so they've got definitely some needs on the defensive side of the football here. And luckily for them, hey, there's a few options here. Also, offensive line, they have lost. Didn't they lose one of their starters? Neither of the tackles. Didn't they lose one of their guards?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So that brings Tyler Booker back
Um,
into the conversation here. But Walter Nolan, who you just mentioned for the Ravens here, is that a possibility?
I think so. I think he's definitely a possibility here. Um, I think you got other Carmen as a possibility here too. Um, I would seriously take a look at those guys as being who I would go with here with this pick, and I would go with the interior. Now they could use some edge help. They could use some edge help. They could go after Pierce. They could go after Skirton from A&M. The Donovan. Again, I'm not going to try to pronounce that
I'm
name
gonna
from
go
Boston
with
College.
I'm gonna go with Azira Okao. Ryuku? I regret this already. Donovan Iziraku is what I'm gonna go with. Iziraku is what I'm gonna go with it.
I mean,
The Boston College
it's good
Donovan.
enough. Yeah. He had a really good year last year. Just I remember from reading up on him. He had a really good season last year. I'm gonna pull up. He is 6'2" and 248, so a little bit undersized. I don't know how he would fit with Detroit, but he can definitely get after the quarterback. He put up double digit sacks last year. Um, but I think you go with the interior guys. I think I think I'm gonna go. I think I'm leaning towards Derek Carmen. I think that's who I'm. I think that's who I'm leaning towards. 6'4", 313. He could wreak havoc for that Oregon defensive front. He's got some twitch up front. He's quick. He can defend the run. He's a 3-down play. And for Detroit, you need some help for Aiden Hutchinson coming back from that injury. You need some help for him. I think you go get a guy that can defend the run and get after the quarterback.
And that was Derek Harmon over Walter
Yes.
Nolan.
I got a strategy play here with Walter Nolan. I got a couple places.
Oh boy. Now those places don't get to just jump in front of these other places, though, Ryan.
I know, but I think Harmon. I think he makes him. He is a veteran player. Oregon, physical toughness. They preach that, with Dan Lanning there at Oregon coming from Georgia. So I think that would make some. They're going to Oregon, but I mean, defense would be the pick there. I mean, yeah, but Tyler Booker would make a lot of sense too. But also, if Gray Zabel was there, because you don't know how long Frank Ragnow has left to play too.
Yeah.
So it would be a smart move to maybe, if Zabel was there, take him, put him at one of the guard spots, and then once Ragnow called it a career, just maybe like slide Zabel into center, and there's your succession plan. But Derek Harmon there. Let's go to Washington, a team that we probably didn't think would be drafting 29 here. But here they are. Where are you kind of thinking with Washington with this newfound confidence that they have now?
Well, newfound confidence in newly spent cap space, right? So they have
Yeah.
really brought in a lot of players this offseason. And looking all around the place, this is a team that's like, we are ready to win now. You know, they are not building to the future anymore. The future is now. So I'm looking around this roster, and honestly, I feel like running back is probably the spot here to upgrade. And when you're a competing
Ooh.
roster, I'm cool with that. With Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler, I feel like you plop a Marion Hampton on this roster, and we've seen what that can do for a couple of these teams when they've landed that guy at running back. So I feel like that is probably my number one option here. The pass rusher, Pierce, that is one as well. If they want to go interior O line, they could at left guard. So Booker is probably in play there too. I don't think Ibuka or Luther Burden needs to be a pick here after the Debo Samuel trade, but they still could be. But I think that I think Hampton.
I tell you what, I haven't heard that pick for Washington. I mean, Hampton, I think he is too good to fall out of the first round. I think, just like with how how he was at North Carolina last year, how he's been doing in the process of the pre-draft stuff. I could get down with it, but I'll tell you, man, this is crazy. But I'm also looking at Kansas City. Maybe if he were to go this far, I don't know because you got Pacheco, you didn't sign Elijah Mitchell.
But Ryan, they pick after Washington. Ryan, this is how they.
I know. I was thinking if I didn't. I was thinking like, okay, if we're not doing Hampton here, then
Sure.
Hampton I could see for Kansas City.
Yeah, no, totally though. Yeah, I mean Pacheco, I believe, is going into a contract year, right?
That is correct. That is
Yeah, so
correct.
totally.
So, and you'd have Hampton on the 5 year. You got the player option. I'll tell you what. Let's go Hampton here. Let's go Hampton here. I do think there's more pressing. Well, hold on.
Because they've spent enough money. Is there a glaring hole on this roster now?
I think they need some edge help. I think they need some edge help.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I mean, Clelin Farrell, yeah. They could probably use a pass rusher.
And let's just go with the guy. I'll go with the guy out of Boston College.
Okay, that's less fun. And I feel like you're just really trying to angle to get Hampton to Kansas City now. But I'll allow it.
Maybe I could. Maybe I'm angling him to go. Maybe get a lethal duo down on Saquon and Hampton.
They would never throw the ball again. AJ Brown would be so mad. He would have to bring so many books with him to the sideline.
Hey, listen. Think about how much reading he would get done. I mean, I think Dan Quinn would love to add another defender here. Would love to add some help here. Um, I think also corner could be a need, even though Lattimore and they did draft Sanders still last year. But we'll go with again. I'm not going to try to pronounce him. We do have Buffalo here. We do have Buffalo here at number 30. So Kansas City's still a pick away. I don't think they would take Hampton because James Cook was
well. Cook wants $15 million a year.
I don't know. Buffalo might pay him. I mean, they've been paying everybody else on their roster, so
Right.
they might as well. I tell you what, Buffalo. I mean, secondary jumps out. They could another front seven defender. I think could help them out. I'm kind of leaning corner here. I think that they take one of the corners here that falls right around this range. It's just which one, because you got Ezra Thomas, you got Maxwell Harrison, who's got some speed in his game. Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, good pass, has been banged up, but seems like that is kind of cleaned up. Ravel from East Carolina. There's some corners here that Buffalo could take. Matt, where do you see Buffalo's biggest need here? Is it corner?
Well, need wise, it can be corner, it could be pass rush too, though. They brought back, or they brought in Joey Bosa though. They basically replaced Von Miller with Joey Bosa, so that's huge and big. But you could still go the young guy to mix into that rotation too. I think wide receiver is a spot where they could use a guy. I know they love their whole "everybody eats" mantra, but I still feel like they could just use a really good player at wide receiver. I think Shakir's good. I think that Keon Coleman kind of has a role, but like they could just use another guy in that offense. But I'm with you. I think corner is probably the biggest need. I'm just not totally sure the players there that's worth taking here. I think defensive line. We brought Walter Nolan a while ago. I think we could circle back around to that. You mentioned Pierce also. I could go either one of those ways.
I think Walter Nolan. This isn't the spot I had in mind. I had in mind either Kansas City or Philadelphia, because it would make a lot of sense to help with Chris Jones. But I'll tell you what, you pair Walter Nolan, a guy that has some potential, uber loads of potential, along Oliver. Sean McDermott's like, when can I get this guy in the building?
Well, and that interior pass rush is just so important against these really good quarterbacks these days. You don't have time for edge rushers to come around the corners all the time. You got to go the fastest way sometimes. So, yeah, loading up the inside of that defensive line, that could be the way to go for Buffalo.
Yeah, so I guess let's go Walter Nolan here. His drop stops here. Now let's go to Kansas City. Matt, where are you gonna go here for Rebecca's team? Are you gonna go with long snapper or
Well, I refuse to go Omarion Hampton because I feel like you cheated the system here. Uh, I feel like you jumped the line, Ryan. I feel like you took this pick out from in front of Washington. You traded up without giving anything up to do it. So I feel like out of sheer moral ground, I shouldn't do that. But I do think, I mean, my goodness, offensive line is just like such a mess here. Tyler Booker, I don't know where he would even necessarily play right away. Like Caliendo, I guess, could get replaced by him, but like just a body in there. Josh Connerly, just a body. I feel like pick 31, much like with the year they traded the picks of the Ravens for Orlando Brown, in some way or another, pick 31 is helping this offensive line.
you know what? I say let's go Tyler Booker. Let's go Tyler Booker here.
Is it because I got mad at you for jumping the line? Is that why we're off the Hampton pick?
No. I think Tyler Booker here makes a lot of sense because no Joe Thuney. You trade him away. You can just slot him in there. He brings a physical run game there, which it feels like Kansas City is starting to lean on that more.
Oh yeah.
Bring it back to the run game, with Hampton. But I think you bring him back, and you got Trey Smith. You bring him back. I think this pick is used to address the offensive line in some way. Connerly would be a good pick here too, but I think I'm with Booker.
Quite frankly, this entire Kansas City run has lived and died with the offensive line. When the O line's been really
Yeah.
good, they have literally won the Super Bowl every time. When the offensive line has given in, they have lost the Super Bowl every time. Like it literally has lived and died by the offensive line.
It has. It has. All right. Now to talking about the team that tortured that offensive line of theirs, the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right. Do they take your guy James Pierce and continue to torture offensive lines?
Yes, so I think Pierce makes sense here for the Eagles, and just because it feels like not a rebuild, reload type of scenario here. You lose Josh Sweat. You add another bendy pass rusher here. The character concerns have been brought up, and to be honest, I didn't really know them until the draft process, and then I start reading them like, okay, that's interesting, and finding that stuff out. Um, so I think that would make sense. Tight end has been brought up here as of late. I think it would be too rich here, probably. I think second round. I think you take James Pierce here. I think his slide stops here. Although I would kind of love it if he did fall to 35 and the Titans end up getting him. But I think in this scenario, and we can talk a little bit about what top second round would look like. But I think Ibuka, that's you take Ohio State. Hey, you take Ohio State receiver. I mean, they've worked out. So I mean,
Yeah, I he would just be buried on that depth chart though.
no, I'm talking Bidens. At 35.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So we're locked in with Pierce to the Eagles.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
you moved on me there.
yeah. That's my bad. I should have clarified. But I was like, listen, I would love if Pierce would be there at 35, but just with the way things are, I think if Book would be there, I think you run to the podium
Honestly,
and you take him.
I think if this first round happens, I think we could see skill players of the next three picks of Hampton to the Browns, right? One of the receivers to New York, probably Ibuka there, and then Luther Burden to Tennessee. Ryan, as you know, the Tennessee Titans, a great history taking Mizzou wide receivers in round two. Uh, hey, Dorial Green Beckham, how you doing?
Oh
Uh,
boy,
so that wouldn't be perfect for you, I guess. But I
no.
can totally see that happening though, where the first three picks of round two are skill players.
Yeah, I could see that. But for the Giants, I mean, you could also see a quarterback go here. Do one of them take Tyler Shuck if they don't trade into the first round? But I think if Hampton falls out, I think the Browns are rushing as quick as they can. I think they would try to get up there before round two officially starts and say like, "Hey, can we take this guy?"
Right,
And,
just get it done
like,
and over with.
yeah. But I think James Pierce here would make some sense here.
Where do you think, as we kind of talk about the future rounds just a little bit here at the end, Jalen Milrow, it's a player I wanted to ask you at the start and I forgot to. What are your thoughts on Jalen Milrow?
He's got a good arm. He's a big, strong, physical runner, and that's probably about all the positives I have for him.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
feels very Malik Willis to me.
I think his 2023 was better than his 2024. He had Tommy Reese with him, who pointing this out here, who's at Cleveland now.
Okay, yeah,
So there could be a connect the dots type of thing where Milrow could potentially land in Cleveland. I don't know. I think that's just kind of where I'm at with Milrow. Seeing him after these 2 years, he's a guy that is an explosive runner. I mean, like there's times, Matt, where there are holes that he should not that he should have gone down in, but he just ran off and made a big chunk gain out of it. So he's got arm strength too. It's just like who can be an offensive coach that can get the most out of him.
right.
Um, could
It,
that be
it's
Stefanski?
it's
I
very
don't know.
Jalen Hurts, I think. Where Hurts, I really believe if he went to the wrong place, he would have just been Malik Willis. I really do. I think Jalen Hurts in the wrong hands would have been nothing. But in the right hands, he became Jalen Hurts, and he's a star. I really think Milrow is in a similar spot where he's going to be a round two guy, and if he goes to the right place, and it doesn't have to be a place where he plays right away either. It can
Right.
be a place where, and with that skill set, you could go back to how the Ravens used Lamar before he was a starter. You could do some of that just to mix him in. You know, I could totally see, I could see Pete Carroll believing in a guy and saying, "Yeah, we're gonna make packages built around you, and be that guy behind Gino for 2 years before he gets a chance to start." So I could totally see that being the case. I think he's an
Yeah, I
interesting.
kind of see him. I kind of see him as kind of like an inverse Shadur. Shadur, he's got the accuracy, he's got the anticipation, ball placement, but he doesn't have the arm. He doesn't have the mobility. Milrow is the exact opposite. He has those, but it's just the ball placement, the anticipation. It's not there.
Well, Ryan, that's all I got for you here for the NFL draft.
Yeah, we're. Let's see. I don't know when I'm posting this. I'm probably gonna. I'm posting this closer to the actual draft.
Sure.
It is kind of the plan. I think I'm gonna post it the week of the draft, just kind of and keeping kind of like with what we, because I feel like we posted it this type of pod in the week of the draft. So I think that's going to be the plan. But yeah, that is another NFL mock draft in the books for us. I always enjoy doing this. It's always a fun ride. Even though this one was a little bit different, but I enjoyed being a little bit different in this year's version.
Yeah, me too. And you know, I hope next year I will have myself up to snuff and we can go back to the way we've done it before. But this definitely I learned a lot doing this with you too. For sure. Because like I said, this year, you know, life has happened a bit and I just have not quite gotten as deep as I have in the past on a lot of the non-fantasy positions. You know, especially the defense and O-line guys, you know. So no, this is a lot of fun though.
Yeah, it's always a fun time. Draft should be a fun, wild few days and seeing where our teams go. Excited to finally get the Cam Ward stuff locked in, get that all settled in and ready to go, um, and just have that done with. But yeah, it should be a fun time as always with the NFL draft up in Green Bay. Should be a fun time, and we'll see where things hold and see where things hold for these teams in the offseason and have a clearer picture of these teams now as they head in towards OTAs, training camps, and to ultimately
Well,
season. So
in any trades, you know, of veteran players too, right? There's always usually about three that, you know, are like real interesting moves, right? So,
yeah,
you know, I think that's about, you know,
Cousins.
yeah. I think we could get some Jair Alexander possibly, you know,
Yeah.
shake up here, right? Um, you know, yeah, I can see there's usually about three, you know, so I could totally see some of those happening here.
Yeah, I definitely can too. So, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks again to Matt for hopping on. As always, fun to do this every year, and we'll see what your Ravens see with the Titans, and see what that miserable franchise up in Pittsburgh does with the 21st pick.
So miserable.
So so miserable, man. But until then, everybody, have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk about the draft afterwards and see where these teams do. See who are the winners, losers. See who had the head scratching picks. Maybe it's Pittsburgh. Maybe they actually do something smart at 21. But until then, everybody, take care, and we'll talk to you guys soon.